This report happened in my third year of high school, on the first day of school after the holidays. I remember that I arrived at school with that classic laziness at the beginning of the year, meeting my classmates again, seeing who cut their hair, who disappeared, and who had changed classes. It was right in the second class that we noticed the new boy. He entered with the teacher, sat on the last desk in the middle row, and no one said anything. He didn't seem nervous or out of place, just quiet. The strangest thing is that, usually when a new student arrives, the teacher presents. But this time there wasn't that. The teacher only asked for silence and began to write on the board. During the break, we went to talk. He spoke normally, didn't seem shy, and already knew the name of half of the class. He called Gustavo by his nickname, talked to Luana as if he had class with her before. I thought he might be transferred from another school unit, something like that. But when I asked where he was from, he crashed a little. He said he had just moved, but he didn't remember the name of the street. "It's near a market with a blue facade," he said. We thought it was strange, but it was relieved. What really started to bother was that he knew details that no one outside would know. Internal things, like who had fought with whom the previous year, who repeated because of lack, even the name of the cat that Mariana had lost on vacation. And no one remembered telling me anything. In the next class, the math teacher handed over the updated call lists and asked each student to confirm their attendance. When it was his turn, she frowned and asked, "What's your name again?" He answered naturally, but the name was not on the list. She even turned the sheet to see if there was any other mixed class, but nothing. He said maybe it was the secretary's mistake and asked him to stop by at the end of the day. He just nodded, as if he was used to it. The weather got weird. Then, with the more agitated room, I noticed that he didn't write anything down, didn't carry a backpack or material. He was just there, standing, watching. At the end of the class, I went to talk to the coordinator to ask questions about a subject, and I took the opportunity to ask if that new student was from our class. She looked at the list in the system and said she didn't have any new tickets that year for the third year in the morning. I showed her where he had sat, and she said maybe it was from another lost class, but all the classes were complete. I came back to the room already with that bad feeling. When I entered, the desk where he had sat was empty. No one saw him leave. I thought he had gone to the bathroom or left earlier. But after the last class, while we were organizing ourselves to leave, I realized that no one else commented on him. I asked Gustavo, "Where's the new boy?" And he replied, "What boy?" I stood still for a few seconds, waiting for him to remember. But nothing. I talked about the clothes the boy wore, the time he entered the room, even the comment he had made about Gustavo's nickname. And he just kept looking at me, a little uncomfortable, as if I was making everything up. I was talking to the others, Luana, Mariana, even one of the teachers, and no one seemed to remember. I started to doubt myself. But then I went back to the living room, looked at the wallet where he was, and saw something that froze me. Under the wallet, scribbled with a pen, the name he had said was written, and below a small sentence, a little crooked. "You forgot about me the first time." I took a picture of the doodle, but the next day, when I came back to show it to someone, it wasn't there anymore. The wallet was clean, as if no one had taken it. I showed the photo to the coordinator, and she said that it looked old, that maybe it was from another year, from another student. But that name, I looked in the school records. No student with that name in recent years. Even so, I remember him clearly. The face, the way he spoke, the way he observed everything as if he had lived that before. And the most disturbing part, from time to time, in my dreams, he appears, sitting in the same wallet, looking forward. And when I look at him, he just says, "'Tis time, try to remember." My first day of school in the third year started strangely before the signal even hit. I usually arrive early. I like to sit in the same place as always, near the window. When I entered the room, there was only one more student inside, and we went straight to each one to her corner. But when I pulled the chair to sit down, I saw that there was a backpack under my wallet. It was an old backpack, one of those with a faded print and a half-oxidized zipper. At first, I thought someone had forgotten about the previous day, but no one said anything. When I opened it, to try to find a name and give it back to someone, I realized that the notebooks inside were not new. They were from years ago, and they all had the name of the same person, Isidora Ribeiro. The problem is that this name was not strange to me. I was looking at the notebook for a while, trying to remember, until I got the plug. Isidora was that girl who died on the second floor of the school a few years ago, after an accident in a laboratory. I was younger at the time, but I remember the uproar. She slipped, hit her head, and never woke up again. The school was even closed for a few days. And now, on my first day of the last year, I find a backpack with her name on it, under my wallet. I went to ask if anyone had put it there, but no one knew what I was talking about. My colleagues swore that, when they arrived, there was nothing there. Not even the employee who cleaned the room earlier said she saw anything unusual, as if the backpack had simply appeared there. I took the backpack to the coordination, kind of not knowing what to say. I handed it to the secretary, told her that I had found it in the living room, and she took it with a confused expression. When he saw the name in the notebooks, he was silent for a few seconds. Then he said he was going to save it and see with the management. I went back to the room trying to forget that, but I couldn't concentrate the rest of the day. At the time of departure, I went back there to ask if they found out whose it was. The secretary seemed disconcerted. He said he left the backpack in the lost and found room, but when they went to look for it, it was no longer there. No one messed. No one saw it, as if it had never existed. At night, with my head 1,000, I went to look for old photos of the school. I found a 2019 gallery from the year Isadora studied there. In one of the images of her gang, there was the backpack. The same print, same torn detail on the side. It wasn't similar, it was the same backpack. It gave me goosebumps. The following week, I commented discreetly with an older teacher. She turned pale when she heard Isadora's name and said that, after the accident, for a long time, the school cleaning found her materials in places that had already been emptied. As if she went back to the classroom, even without being here anymore, was what she said. I never found the backpack again, but sometimes, when I get to the living room early, I look under my wallet just to be sure. Going back to school after vacation is never easy, but that first day of the third year had a different atmosphere. We entered the room already a little discouraged, but what caught attention was what was written on the blackboard. You shouldn't have come back. The sentence was written with white chalk, large letters, a little inclined, as if it had been made in a hurry, but still firm and readable. The room was silent for a few seconds, and soon the buzz began. Some laughed thinking it was a prank from another shift. Others were uncomfortable. I stood there looking, with a chill on the back of my neck that didn't make sense. When the teacher arrived, we were still commenting. He read the sentence, rolled his eyes, and said it was vandalism, that probably someone entered the school during the recess and wanted to make fun. He took the eraser and erased the sentence with force, as if he also wanted to take away the heavy atmosphere that was left. He tried to start class normally, but the class didn't concentrate properly. Every now and then, someone let out a, "But who writes this? Do you think it's serious?" Or, "Is there a camera in the living room?" No one had any idea who could have done that, since the room, according to the inspector, had been locked throughout the recess, and the windows were closed from the inside. But the strange thing was still far from over. After the third class, we were released for the break. Most of them went down to the courtyard, but I kept hanging out in the room with 2 other colleagues, just exchanging ideas. The light was on, the door open, and the blackboard clean. A few minutes later, we decided to go down too, and left the room empty. No one stayed inside, and the corridor was completely empty at that moment. About 20 minutes later, we returned with the rest of the class. When we opened the door, the room was the same, except for one detail. The phrase was back. Same letter, same size, same place. You shouldn't have come back. This time, no one thought it was funny. The teacher came in soon after and locked the door. He kept looking at the painting, as if he was sure that he himself had erased that. The class was silent for a long time, and he just said it was a thing of people with nothing to do, and deleted it again. But this time, he passed the eraser harder, nervous. You could see that he couldn't understand either. A student suggested that someone could be hiding in the room and wrote while we were out, but all the windows were locked inside, and the only access was the front door. And it was open, with several students around all the time. No suspicious movement. No sound. The phrase simply appeared. The rest of the day, we had that subject in mind. No one else could pay attention in class. The next teacher even tried to continue the content normally, but you could see that everyone looked at the blackboard all the time, as if the phrase was going to appear there again at any moment. At the end of the class, I went to talk to the inspector who usually takes care of our walk, and asked, half innocently, if anyone had access to the rooms during the holidays. She made a serious face and replied that only maintenance came in and still accompanied. I insisted, I said the phrase, and she frowned. "This again," she said. "I thought they had erased all these things." That's when I understood that it wasn't the first time. I asked what she meant by these things, and she deviated, saying that it was just something of an old student who liked to leave strange notes on the board. But the way she spoke didn't convince. She knew more. I returned home with the feeling that something was out of place, as if that phrase had been left there for someone, or for all of us. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual and went straight to the living room. It was empty, light off, but when I lit it, the phrase was there, for the third time. But this time, there was something more. Just below, someone had written with smaller letters, "You forgot what happened here." I read that in silence for a few minutes, feeling my heart beating faster. I didn't know what exactly had happened there before, but the feeling was that we were messing with something that should have been buried. When the teacher entered the room and saw the new sentence, he turned pale. Unlike the day before, he didn't erase it immediately. He stood there, staring at the blackboard as if he was remembering something. Then he turned his back, took the eraser slowly, and just said, "This should have stopped in 2018. No one understood what he meant. I tried to ask, but he just said that old things shouldn't be brought back. During recess, I went to the school library. I started to move the old newspapers and records that are stored on a dusty bookshelf behind the counter. It took me a while, but I found a news from 2018. Student mysteriously disappears inside the school and is not found. His name was Vinicius. I studied in the same class, in the same room. According to the newspaper, he was last seen entering the school, but he never left. Cameras failed, no one heard anything. A complete disappearance. And the strangest part, the first time the disappearance was reported, was on the first day of school, on the same date as our return that year. I went back to the room trembling, holding the old folded newspaper inside the backpack. I showed 2 colleagues who were with me when we saw the phrase for the first time. One of them remembered the case vaguely, said he had heard his mother comment at the time, but the school stifled everything. No tribute, no explanation. They just disappeared with the story, as if nothing had happened. I started to wonder if that warning on the blackboard was just a warning, or a kind of memory left by someone who never had the chance to leave there. Someone who is still trying to be noticed, even if he is no longer present in the way we understand. Since then, no one else has seen the phrase. But every time the gang enters the room, the silence is different, as if the space was still loaded. I myself avoid looking too much at the blackboard at the first time. I'm afraid to see that written again. And worse, to be the only one who sees. And you? Have you ever felt that a place was trying to tell you something? There are messages that don't disappear with the eraser. It was the first day of school after the holidays, and as always, everything seemed a little slow. The class was sleepy, the teacher talking in a dragged way about year planning, and I, as usual, was already looking at nothing with my head away. I sat in the back row next to the wall, right in front of the door. That door had a rectangular glass on top, matte enough to blow details, but you could still see figures or movements outside. It was in the middle of the teacher's explanation that I looked by reflex, and saw a silhouette stop in the exact center of the glass. He didn't mod, he didn't walk, he didn't do anything. It was just there. At first, I thought it was an employee, or a student who had missed the time and was waiting to enter. But time went by and the figure was still in the same place. Fixed. Without swinging the body, without turning the face, without even changing posture. It was like it was stuck there. And then I started to notice something else. The glass made everything a little distorted, but you could see the contour of the shoulders, the head, the hands. And that didn't seem right. The proportion was strange. The hands seemed too long. I raised my hand and called the teacher, pointing to the door. He stopped talking, looked, and walked there. When it opened, the corridor was completely empty. The teacher even took a look to the sides, as if he expected to see someone around the corner, but there was nothing. No footsteps in the distance, no slamming door. Absolute silence. He went back to the living room and said that probably someone had passed by there, and we only saw the reflection. But I knew it wasn't that. That figure was standing still, and for too long. The strange thing is that, after he opened the door, several students began to comment that they had also felt something strange at that moment. One of them, Pedro, said he felt a pressure in his chest, as if the air had become heavier. Another girl commented that she thought she heard a muffled noise, like a whisper, but she thought it was something in her head. The class continued, a little tense, but trying to look normal. But I couldn't pay attention anymore. I kept looking at the door, waiting to see the silhouette again. And that's when I noticed something that gave me goosebumps. The glass of the door, which was always a little blurry because it was matte, now looked cleaner, as if someone had touched their forehead and left a mark. I got up at the end of class, went there, and passed my hand. The brand was there, a round spot, in the exact center, as if someone had stood still, breathing, leaning against the glass. And on the side, in the corner, for very thin vertical marks, as if nails had lightly scratched the surface. After that, I started asking the others if they remembered the figure in more detail. Most said they hadn't seen anything, or didn't pay attention. But one of the boys in the front row, who had turned to talk to me when I saw her, said that he had noticed a figure, yes, and that he thought it was the reflection of someone passing through the corridor. When I said that the teacher opened the door seconds later, and there was no one, he was quiet for a while and replied, "So I don't want to think about what I saw standing there." The phrase was hammering in my head all day. It wasn't just me. Someone else had seen it. That wasn't imagination. At the time of leaving, I passed through the same corridor outside the room. The light was on, everything normal, but when I stopped in front of the glass on the outside, one thing bothered me, the angle. Outside, you couldn't stay exactly in the position where the figure appeared without it being possible to see it through the corner of the door as well. In other words, if there was really someone there, standing still, everyone in the room would have seen the complete silhouette, not just the part in the glass. That didn't hit. The height also seemed wrong. The glass reached the top of the door, and the figure's head was higher than normal. It was as if the thing on the other side wasn't standing. It was higher than the door itself. The next morning, with the school still empty, I decided to come back earlier, and went through the same corridor again. The room was locked, but the mark on the glass was still there, now a little more blurred, but visible. While I was staring at that, the coordinator passed by and saw me standing there. He asked what I was doing, and I made up some excuse. When I mentioned the mark on the glass, she was silent for a moment and then said, "They've already cleaned this several times. It always reappears." As if it wasn't the first time. As if that was part of the school routine, and no one talked openly about it. Since then, I've never been able to look at that glass without feeling my stomach turn. Sometimes during classes, I find myself distracted and staring at the reflection, hoping to see that silhouette again. And the worst? Once, almost at the end of the semester, I swear I saw it. But this time, it wasn't just the contour. It was a face. Expressionless, still looking straight at me. I blinked, and it disappeared. No one else saw it. But I know what I saw. And you? Have you ever faced a reflection, and had the impression that something there was not yours? Some glasses don't show what's outside. They show what's in between. This happened on a Tuesday, right in the first week of school. It was early in the morning, and as always, I went to my closet in the second floor hallway to get the notebook before class. When I opened it, I got scared. There was a cell phone in there, but it wasn't mine. It was an old model, with the screen a little cracked and no cover. The strangest thing was that the front camera was on. And worse, I was recording. The screen showed my surprised face, as if it had been placed there on purpose, just waiting for me to open the door. I looked to the sides to see if it was a prank, but the corridor was empty. I took the device in my hand, with that instinctive fear of touching something I shouldn't. The screen was unlocked, directly on the camera. I left the recording function, and went to the gallery, curious. I had a folder with dozens of short videos, all recorded inside the school. I recognized the classroom, the patio, even the men's bathroom. But the angles were completely impossible. A video showed my friend Luana writing in the notebook, with the image coming from above, as if it had been filmed from a high point on the wall. And there is no camera there. Another video showed two colleagues whispering at the back of the room, recorded from a diagonal that would only be possible if someone was behind the teacher's locker, which is impossible without him noticing. The dates of the files were recent, from 2 days ago. That gave me all the goosebumps. I kept looking at the videos, with the feeling that I was watching something that no one should have seen. One of them froze me for good. It showed me sleeping during a class, with my head leaning against my backpack. The recording was long, silent, and done very closely, as if the camera was inches from my face. The problem is that I never sleep in the living room, at least not on that day. And no one was so close to me to film that without me noticing. It was as if the cell phone had been under my wallet, or even inside my backpack. I started shaking. I left the gallery and looked around again, trying to understand who could have done that. But the corridor was still completely empty. I thought about taking the cell phone to the coordination, but something told me that there would be no time. I decided to shoot the screen with my own cell phone, but before I could open the camera, the device's screen crashed. It turned black. I tried to call again, nothing. I pressed the power button for a few seconds, and when the screen relit, it asked for a password. A 6-digit password. I tried the basics, 000000, 123456, nothing worked. I kept the device in my backpack to show it to someone later. When the signal hit and I entered the room, I was still trying to digest what I had seen. I was the whole time with the backpack on my lap, afraid that someone would know that I had messed with that device. At break time, I went straight to look for Raphael, one of the only friends I really trusted. I told him everything and took him to a corner of the courtyard to show his cell phone. When I opened the backpack, he was no longer there. I went through everything, pencil case, notebooks, even the back of the smaller pocket. I went back to my closet, trying to wonder if I could have left it there by mistake. Also empty. At that moment, I began to feel that someone was watching me. It wasn't paranoia. It was that real, physical feeling of being observed from a distance. I looked around, but no one was paying attention. I returned to the living room later with a restlessness that didn't pass. After class, I went back to the closet once again, just out of conscience. So, what made me freeze was watching a new video on my phone. I didn't open any camera, nor did I leave it unlocked. But there it was, a video saved on the camera roll, recorded from above, showing myself fiddling with the strange cell phone, hours before. The angle? Exactly the same as the videos of the mysterious device. I almost dropped my cell phone in my hand. Someone or something was filming us from inside the room, from a point that didn't physically exist. I no longer knew if I was dealing with an elaborate joke, an invasion or something that was not human. The next day, I arrived earlier and went straight to the board. I tried to explain what happened, but I felt completely stupid while talking. The director kept looking at me with that face of someone who listens, but doesn't believe it. She said she was going to investigate, asked me to hand over that cell phone, and when I explained that it had disappeared, her expression closed for good. He thanked me and said that any new occurrence should be communicated immediately. When I left her room, I was sure she thought I was making everything up. But deep down, I felt like she knew something, or that he had heard similar stories before and preferred to ignore them. I never found that cell phone again, but from time to time, I get strange notifications on mine. Videos that appear and disappear in seconds. Blurred miniatures of places I recognize, my living room, the corridor, my closet. I've already changed my device, password, I've cleaned everything. It's no use. It always comes back. And you? Have you ever had the feeling that your life is being recorded, but by someone who shouldn't even be there? There are eyes that don't blink, and they don't have to be in the same room to see you. The class had started normally that morning. It was the first week of class, so the teachers were still in that phase of presentation and called to know the names of the class. The history teacher was new and arrived with an old clipboard in his hand, reading the names one by one. Everything was normal until he called a name that no one recognized. Mateus Carvalho. The gang was silent. No one answered. He repeated, Mateus Carvalho? Nothing new. I looked at my colleagues, all with the same confused expression. After a pause, he frowned, looked at the list again and murmured that maybe it was the secretary's mistake. It turns out that, during the break, a friend of mine named Diego came to me with a pale face and said something strange. He said that before class started, when he was washing his face in the bathroom, he heard someone whisper a name behind him. He thought it was a joke, but now he was sure of what he had heard. The name was the same. Mateus Carvalho. According to him, the bathroom was empty. He had even checked all the cabins, but the whisper came right next to the ear, as if someone was leaning against it. He said that at the time he crashed, stood still for a few seconds, and then ran away. I thought he was exaggerating, until the coordinator mentioned something that changed everything. At the end of the class, when we were still commenting on the strange name on the list, the coordinator entered the room to bring some notices and took the opportunity to collect some signatures from the teachers. The history teacher commented casually that an extra name had appeared on the call and asked if she knew who it was. When he said Mateus Carvalho, she stopped. It was instant. He was silent for a few seconds, then forced a strange smile and said he was going to check with the secretary. But her expression delivered everything. It seemed that she had just heard something that she would rather not have been remembered. At the end of the day, I went to the school library with Diego and two other friends who had also been intrigued by that. We started messing with the old files. There are some old folders there with lists of students from previous years, events, these things. The librarian didn't care much. She thought it was for a job. After more than half an hour of searching, we found a 2013 attendance list. 9th grade class. And there it was, Mateus Carvalho, 14 years old. We did a faster search on Google, typing name and the name of the school, and an old news appeared. 14-year-old student dies after sudden fainting in the classroom. Guess where? In the same room as ours. The article was short, without many details. He said that he got sick during class, fell to the floor, and, despite having called for help, he couldn't resist. Sudden death, probably cardiac. But what caught attention was the date. Exactly 10 years ago, in the same month we were in. The school did not make any kind of mention, memorial, or warning about this. As if the case had been swept under the carpet. We showed everything to the teacher the next day, and he was completely unresponsive. He said that the name appeared printed on the list delivered by the secretariat, like all the others. When he went to check, the original sheet was no longer with him, and the new copy of the attendance list did not have the name. Things got even stranger when, one morning that same week, the cleaner commented loudly to another employee who found crumpled paper inside the trash can in room 204. It was a call sheet, and at the top, the name Mateus Carvalho circled with a red pen. I heard that because I was passing in the hallway at that moment. I stopped, asked to see the paper, but the woman said she had already thrown it away. I started to notice other small things after that. The erased blackboard, and in the lower corner, an almost invisible scribbled name. A lost notebook in the hallway, with the letter MC on the back cover. But no one remembered having seen this notebook before, nor who it could be. The following week, the school began to avoid the subject. They had a meeting with the teachers. The coordinator passed by the rooms reinforcing that it was not allowed to spread rumors, and that any doubt should be taken to the direction. But for us, the silence only confirmed that there was something there. Diego, since that day in the bathroom, began to feel bad. Headaches, insomnia, and even reported that he heard someone whispering his name twice, once at home, another in the upstairs hallway. I started to write down everything that happened, and noticed a pattern. Every time the name Mateus appeared in some way, something small happened soon after. A sudden blackout, the projector turning on by itself, or the door slamming without any wind. On the last day of that week, the history teacher asked us to write our full names on a sheet for the final conference. Everyone delivered it. When he read aloud, checking name by name, there he was again, Mateus Carvalho. But no one had written that. No handwriting beat. The name appeared alone among two other names, perfectly aligned, as if it were part of the list from the beginning. He turned pale, folded the paper, and left the room. He never commented on it again. We were on the second day of school, and as always, that back corridor was practically forgotten. It was the old wing of the school, where they still left some metal cabinets that no one else used. Me, Vinicius, and Giovanna went there out of curiosity, because I heard that sometimes there were closets left over there, and you could use them at the beginning of the year. Most had the doors open, dirty, some without shelves. But there was one, right at the end of the corridor, that caught our attention. It was locked with the latch stuttered, but what really bothered was the upper glass, fogged inside. When Giovanna approached, she noticed that there were scratch marks inside the door. Many, as if someone had tried to get out of there with nails. We were there for a while in silence, trying to understand. Vinicius knocked on the door, half-jokingly, and the muffled metal sound came back. It was different from the other lockers. This one still seemed busy. We forced the latch a little, which was old, and it ended up giving in after a few attempts. When we opened it, the smell was the first thing that hit. A smell of old thing mixed with something stronger, metallic. Inside, there was only a school uniform t-shirt, folded in a strange way, with a dark brown spot, which clearly looked like dried blood. And next to it, stuck in the lower corner with a clip, there was a crumpled piece of paper. A ticket, handwritten with only two quick scribbled words, "Help me." Giovanna turned pale at the time. He took the ticket carefully, as if he was afraid of tearing it, and stared for a few seconds. The paper was a little damp at the ends, as if it had been stored there for a long time, but the ink was still visible. The strangest thing was the way the words were written, as if the person was shaking or in too much of a hurry. Vinicius, trying to rationalize, said it was probably a joke of some old student. but there was nothing funny about that. The t-shirt was from a model that the school wore for at least 7 years. I remembered because it was the same one my brother wore when he studied there. And no one knew who owned that closet. We decided to take the ticket to the coordination, but their reaction was strange. The coordinator looked quickly and said she was going to check with the cleaning. He didn't even ask properly where we found it. But what really disturbed us was what happened at the end of the class. Vinicius went to the archive room, which is near the office, to ask if it was possible to know whose closet that was. One of the oldest employees, who barely spoke to the students, got a little nervous when he heard the number. He said that that closet should no longer be in use, and that, if it was open, it was to be left closed. And that was it. He didn't explain anything. He just got that strange face, as if he had remembered something he preferred to forget. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the ticket. The image of those shaky words, the blood on the t-shirt, the scratches inside the door. Everything was spinning in my head. I started searching the internet for anything related to school, some old case. I found almost nothing. But in a forgotten forum, a kind of discussion of former students, I found a loose comment from 2016 that said, "Until today no one talks about that closet at the bottom of Block C." There was no context, no answers. I sent it to the group with Giovanna and Vinicius. We agreed to come back the next day early before class started to see if we could find any more clues. But when we got there, the closet was closed again, locked with a different padlock. As if someone had returned there during the early morning and sealed everything. The t-shirt is gone. The paper too. Even the scratches seemed more erased, as if someone had tried to sponge or something like that. We stood there for a few minutes, just watching. The feeling was horrible, as if we were being watched. And I swear that, for a moment, I heard a sound coming from inside. A snap, very weak. Giovanna heard it too. We left there in silence, without saying anything. Something in that school is hidden, and we just bumped into the tip. We tried to comment again with the coordination, but this time the answer was more direct. They said that that closet was no longer part of the structure in use, and asked us not to go back there. They used a firm, almost threatening tone. Giovanna was paranoid for days, saying that she had seen someone similar to the cleaning employee standing in the hallway at night, just looking in the direction of her classroom. Vinicius stopped talking about the subject, and I started having nightmares with the sound of nails scratching metal. Repeatedly. Always the same sound, as if something was trying to come out. But it never goes out. Never. Today, every time I pass through that corridor, I even avoid looking in the direction of the closet. But sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, it seems to me that he is half open again. A minimal span, just enough to give the impression that someone may be peeking inside. Have you ever had the feeling that something in an ordinary place was trying to be forgotten? But it's still there, waiting? Not everything that is locked is quiet forever. I swear by everything that I'm not the type to invent something. And I'm not one to make easy friends either. So when I realized that the girl in the back wallet brought up the subject with me in the first week of school, I even found it strange. It was a light conversation, like quick comments about the teacher, the heat in the room, the tight corridors. She laughed in a kind of restained way. She seemed shy, but friendly. We exchanged a few phrases throughout the class, and even without totally turning back, I could see that she wore the same uniform as us, but with the long-sleeved blouse underneath. I found it curious, because it was so hot that day. When the class ended, I turned to say something, and she was no longer there. No sign. Just the empty wallet. I thought she had left quickly. During the break, I commented with some colleagues, asking if anyone knew a young girl, dark hair, short, half pale, who sat back there. No one had any idea who it was. I went to the teacher and asked if he knew her name. Maybe he was on the call. He looked at me a little confused and said that that wallet had been empty the whole time, that he didn't see anyone there. I went back to the room at the end of the day to see if she had left anything, I don't know, a notebook, a backpack, anything that proved that she was there. But the wallet was empty, clean, as if no one had sat there all day. I stood still for a few seconds, looking at the place where she was, trying to remember every detail. I remembered her voice. It was low but clear. She remembered that she commented something about not liking to be in the middle of the room too much, because she felt observed. At the time I thought it was just shyness. But now it started to sound strange. I left with my head spinning. In the following days, I started to ask other people discreetly. No one had seen anyone new in the class. The inspector said he didn't have any new students listed that week. And then something bothered me even more. I realized that no one seemed to remember my conversation with her. I thought someone might have noticed. The room was silent most of the time, and we talked in a low voice, but not whispering. And yet, it was as if that had only happened for me. I even doubted myself for a moment, until something appeared in my notebook. On the last sheet of my history notebook, which I swear I wasn't scribbled before, a message written in pencil appeared. Very weak, almost disappearing, but you could read. "Thank you for talking to me." My hand frosted at the time. It was someone's handwriting, thin and rounded, totally different from mine. I showed it to Vinicius, who was sitting next to me, and he said he had never seen that before. I went to check the other articles, but only that sheet had the message. And the most bizarre, she was in the new notebook, which I had started using that day. How could something like that have appeared without me noticing? The next morning, I entered the room earlier, before everyone else, and went straight to the back wallet. I had a strange feeling, as if I had to check for myself. I leaned against the seat, pulled the table, looked underneath. And that's when I saw, very discreet, almost erased, a name crossed out several times on the wood. Ana Lucia. My stomach turned at the time. I went back to the coordination room and asked, a little awkwardly, if there had ever been any student with that name. The coordinator hesitated. He said yes, but it was a long time ago, and looked away. Only later, fiddling with old files of the student guild, did I find a photo of a class from 8 years ago. And there she was, in the last wallet, dark hair, long-sleeved blouse. The name in the caption, Ana Lucia. I stared at that photo for a few good minutes. It wasn't just similar, it was the same girl I had talked to. Same expression, same way of looking. In the caption it said that she had died in 2015, in the middle of the school year, from complications of a heart problem. He died inside the school during a class. The detail that gave me goosebumps was where, in the same wallet where she appeared to me. Since then, no one else sat there. It was as if, even with the passing years, that place had been marked in some way. And for some reason, that day, she decided to show up. Or I needed someone to talk to. I never saw her again after that. No other message, no other signal. But from time to time, when I enter the room before the class arrives, I have the feeling that there is someone in the back. A quiet presence which doesn't scare, just observes. Have you ever talked to someone and then found out that this person shouldn't be there anymore? There are conversations that are not to be remembered. They are not to be forgotten.